Marley's pronouns are they, them. Marley is a freelance speaker, writer, and consultant with a passion for diversity, equity, justice, and inclusion, in particular for trans rights. As a non-binary person and parent of one, they combine their transition and lived experience with speaking, writing, and blogging to improve trans and LGBTQIA plus inclusion and rights. Marley is devoted to creating resources for trans and non-binary parents, sharing their journey and stories as a trans and non-binary parent on at the non-binary parent, and I'll include that link in the chat if you want to check it out after. And I'll hand over to Marley now to talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. I'm sorry the talk has changed slightly, but we're still gonna go through all the topics that are important for trans rights at the moment. Before we start, I wanted to touch upon the global situation on LGBTQ, especially trans rights in the world. As of today, the Human Rights Campaign has declared the state of emergency for LGBTQ plus living in the US. This is the 21st of February today, and already over 367 bills have been introduced to attack the LGBTQ community, especially the trans community. In Florida, the Don't Say Gay bill has been expanded to include high school setting, and as of the 1st of July last year, and all state-run venues included airport and school, trans plus people are required to use a bathroom which correspond to their sex assigned at birth or be arrested on trespass. In fact, between 2020 and 2021, LGBTQ plus hate crimes in the US has increased by 70%. Which means LGBTQ plus people are now 9 times more likely to experience a violent hate crime. In the UK, the situation is not better. From 2021 to 2022, there was a 36% jump in reported hate crimes against LGBTQ plus people. And in the same year, hate crimes against trans people rose by 46%. A recent Just Like Us surveys has found that 9 in 10 young trans people consider suicide. And it's no surprise that the UK has been flagged by several human rights organizations and political groups as an hostile environment for LGBTQ plus people. Across Europe, the sentiment is rising too. The anti-trans sentiment is rising too. Poland and Hungary have announced LGBTQ-free zones and bans on materials seen as promoting homosexuality. Russia as well. In Italy, my home country, the names of non-biological parents in same-sex relationship are being removed retroactively from the children's birth certificate. This invalidates the second parent's right on making any decision relating to the kid's life. In the past 12 months, we have seen a EU-wide increase in hate crimes and anti-LGBTQ violence, with France, Belgium, and the Netherlands all reporting increases in reported hate crime up to 30%. So, as you can see, talks like today are extremely important because we live through these times and, you know, our rights are being stripped and the places we live are becoming more hostile. And now more than ever, we need to come together and need active allyship to fight against this backlash. I am extremely lucky. I live in a very privileged position where I have a spouse and a child who have been more than accepting of me and supported me in my transition. Unfortunately, that's not the reality for most trans non-binary people. I came out very late in life. I was well over 30 and already a parent when I finally found the right words to describe who I was. And I was actually 35 when I first said the words trans and non-binary for the first time. If I look back into my life, I remember when I was a teenager, all these years afterwards, struggling to understand myself and my body, dressing and acting as feminine as I could to make sure that I fitted in with what was expected of me. There was no language or out and proud non-binary person, at least not in Italy, for me to research and understand. And my only option was to pick between two genders when I felt I wasn't either. So I just assumed that there must be something wrong with me, and that I should put my head down and be the girl that everyone told me I was. Like me, many queer folks grow up in places where we can't really be who we are, and places that we had our first experience of oppression and shame, where we feel different and uncomfortable, and we just can't wait to leave behind. So I moved to London from Italy when I was 20, full of internalized homophobia and transphobia, and it took me another 15 years before I was able to come out. Struggling with my sexuality as well as my gender identity. Any queer relationship I had during this year kept hidden, even though I was, thousands of miles away from home. No one knew me. It would have been really easy to be out, but something always stopped me. And although it wasn't easy, I do believe, looking back now, that taking my time was the best choice for me. Pregnancy was the real catalyst in my gender journey. It was difficult. It was a difficult time for a lot of reasons. My dad, unfortunately, was dying at the same time that I found out I was pregnant, but I was also in still firm denial about my gender, and seeing my body changing and doing something that was defined so woman according to everyone around me really took a toll on me. And the good old inner transphobia that I carried, and I still do sometimes, to be fair, simply told me that I was having a hard time because of what was happening with my dad. It was nothing to do with my gender. I was just simply, in a bad place at the wrong time. In reality, my mind couldn't process a body that was screaming femme every minute of every day. There weren't any support groups or resources or people that I could talk to. And despite having an amazing supportive spouse, I found the whole process very isolating and a roller coaster of emotion that I could not handle by myself. Not being able to voice my dysphoria or distress because I did not have either language or gender affirming healthcare really made me hate my body even more, to a point of rejecting myself. And this is something I still have to not quite fully recovered from. Being a trans non-binary parent is a fulfilling and joyous journey, but can come with a lot of frustration and feeling of alienation. Unfortunately, parenthood, as you can imagine, is still a very gendered experience. And as a non-binary parent myself, I can tell you numerous situations when I felt isolated, misgendered, ignored, disrespected, from healthcare to community spaces. There are many things that still need to change for parenthood to be a truly inclusive experience. If you think about it, when we talk about parents, we really mostly refer to mothers. Pregnancy and parenthood are mostly linked with femininity. And even the professional language, the healthcare language, most professionals still use gendered language, and gender pronouns were referred to birthing parents. Birth certificates still have mother and father, especially if you're the birthing parents, you only refer to as mother. And changing little things like this could have a huge effect on birthing parents' self-acceptance and mental health. Studies have shown that the use of correct pronouns and name can lower the risk of suicide and increase self-acceptance. So imagine how much it could change for a trans non-binary person during pregnancy and parenthood as a journey. Really, my kid was 4, I think, when I came out. So getting to that as I was struggling with my gender was really isolating, and there was no inclusive spaces to find community or support. And you're already in a real roller coaster of emotion as a new parent. You have no idea what you're doing. Your hormones are all over the place. And not having anyone that could understand what I was going through really made a difference to how I journeyed on. So on top of that, I had to discuss with my partner what was going on and how I was feeling, and the inner fear of I'm going to be rejected, I'm going to be left, and then it's not just me, it's going to be our child that is going to suffer because I can't just fit in within the boxes that have been assigned when I was born. It was only through COVID that I was able to come out. Bizarrely, they're all locked down. They're all not leaving the house, meeting people, having to perform for society was really liberating for me. And I think I heard a few stories of other queer people that went through this journey at the same time. Being able to feel safe, the opportunity not to have to leave the house and perform for others, feeling safe within our four walls and our little family of three, really did give me the chance to not having to mask anymore, to be able to explore my gender within the time and however I wanted. So that was incredibly liberating. It did bring in a complete 360 of a compensating the other way. So I went from hyper femininity to baggy clothes, short hair, binding, because I just didn't want people to misgender me anymore. So the more invisible I could look, the more plain I could look, and the more ungendered I could look, the more I thought it would be easy once I stepped out of these doors for people to not just assume I was a girl by the way I looked. That was still not the solution. It still wasn't me. I still got misgendered anyway, and it wasn't until after I had top surgery that I really found myself and saw who I was reflected in the mirror. Now, surgery is not for every trans person, it's not for every non-binary person. It was for me. I needed it to feel myself. And as a person with multiple identities that fall out of the binary, I'm also bisexual and grey sexual, which if you don't know what they are, we can discuss afterwards. Being able to step out of the box, I was placed in and embrace all the possibility ahead of me, especially as a parent. As we said, they're always linked to specific gender behavior and expectation. It's been really liberating. And rather than something to be ashamed of, I now get to set the limits, to define who I am based on my needs and emotion, rather than everyone else's, assume I should be. And by leaving the gender binary behind, I discovered that there's really no right or wrong way to frame my gender experience, or in my case, the lack of it. I don't feel limited to be one way or another. I can explore everything, sometimes nothing. And I get to dress the way I like. Sometimes I even steal my spouse's clothes because they fit me just as well as they do him. And the best bit is that I get to find a new language to define our family. I get to show our kid that there is so much joy in being who we truly are, instead of who society expects us to be, that it is okay to explore who we are and be different. And I get to bring her up in an environment that she knows she's loved unconditionally, regardless of gender or sexual orientation, that she's loved for who she is instead of who the world expects her to be, and the way kind of like give her a better childhood than most queer people have, if she turns out to be queer. And if not, she's just going to be an amazing ally as she grows. So as you can see, we are in 2024 now, and we still are coming out. This is still not a phase. There are plenty of people that are still hiding out there because we don't feel safe, especially in places like the workplace. If you look at the latest statistic, 50% of trans people in the UK still hide their identity at work, and 34% of trans people were excluded by colleagues for being trans. When you look at the US, the figures are pretty similar. It's 50% of trans people, again, who hide their identity at work. And 66% of trans people in the US also hide their identity in professional interaction outside their own company. Cisgender people still earn 32% more money in a year than trans people do. And in the US, transgender people are twice as likely to be unemployed than cisgender people. This is why when people say, oh, but you came out so late. And I was like, I like to say that I came out later in life, not late. And this is why, because we still fear repercussion, we still fear rejection. When you look at employment discrimination, stereotypes and biases have led to so much barriers of entry and career progression. When you look at hiring practices, for example, having to disclose name and gender. There are people like me who hold two citizenship, and therefore both my passport have to match. So whilst my UK passport would be really easy to change my name because I could do it by deed poll, my Italian passport doesn't allow me the same privilege. I would have to go to court for quite a few years, bring out paperwork to show why I need to change my name, and then a judge would have the last decision if I'm allowed to change my name or not. So hiring practices, having to disclose names and gender even before you're through the door could bring, barriers to trans people like me. A lack of accessibility and support, microaggression, all sorts of trainings that could be implemented to help with trans people in the workplace. When you look at gender stereotypes, they can lead to pay gap, promotion rates, personal development, career progression. As I said, those are all things that should need to be addressed. Microaggression, in case you don't know what they are everyday, subtle, verbal and non-verbal behavior that express prejudice and discrimination against members of a marginalized group. Doesn't necessarily, not just trans people. It could be race, gender, sexuality, religion. Sometimes microaggression are intentional, but sometimes is a simple lack of understanding, and they are unintentionally coming out of a lack of awareness. So some workplaces, for example, of microaggression could include dead naming, referring to a trans person by the name from before the transition, toilet accessibility, and imposed dress code. Even remotely, there are still companies that ask for all cameras to be on. And when you think of it, not everyone's gender expression is the same inside the house or outside. And you might ask a trans person to not feel safe within their own safe space, because they would have to change the gender expression if they're not out at work. But discussions like these are really helpful, and they can really change how the workplace and outside the workplace we relate and help trans people live in their lives like we just want to. So, think of just supporting, choosing and using bathrooms that align with the gender identity. If possible, non-gender bathroom would be the way to go. And when people say that is something that we're not used to, I would give the example of an airplane or a train or your own house where we all use a non-gender bathroom. Changing the dress code to allow employees to wear clothes that align with the gender identity. A fantastic example of this would be the latest Virgin uniform campaign. Think about, as we said, remote working, give option to have the cameras off, providing optional pronoun badges. Not everyone would want to display them, but the fact that if you are a cis person and you have your pronouns on your signature, on your email, on your Zoom, on a badge, as a trans person who might not be out, I know that you would be a safe person to go to if I ever needed it. So, think of, in terms of safety as well, of allyship. And this also encourages employees not to assume a person identity and to ask for pronouns if I'm sure. Change policies, allow for smooth name change in transition, includes instances when, trans people might not be legally able to change their names, like me. Create support networks for your employees, having someone that can relate to our stories that we can share, that we can talk things through, is extremely important. And I think, you know, as most important, as always, challenge homotransphobic behavior and comments. And I don't mean that you necessarily also have to do it straight away. I can appreciate there is always an element also of fear, but you can report them. You can say something afterwards to someone in charge at work saying, I heard this, maybe we should do something. You know, we always left to fight our own battles in a way or in another. And also think of, in terms of day-to-day, what can be done at work. Offer pay transparency to improve accountability to your wage practice. Commit to recurring reviews of salary budget. Check your glass ceiling. Is the company giving the same opportunity to everyone, not just the same groups of people? Support legislative measure to improve equal pay protection. Make sure that you have non-discriminatory policies that include both sexual orientation and gender identity. Sometimes we think, oh, but we have LGBTQ non-discriminatory policies. Do they include the whole umbrella, or we just stopping at the first 3 letters? You know, look at things like parental leaves. Does your policy move on from gender language so everyone is included? Do you have a separate policy for surrogacy or adoption? When, you know, those are different than parental leave. Gender affirming healthcare. Does your company offer support before and after? Think of gender identity specific benefits, support groups, recovery from work from home options, and then really look at your diversity, equity, justice, and inclusion. You know, talk to your employees, figure out where changes are needed and how to implement it. If you don't have any out trans people, reach out to consultancies so that you can actually tackle the problems that as a cisgender person you might not be able to see. Those are all things that can be done. But I think as of today, as of 2024, with everything that is going on outside of the workplace, in government, in the media, who is, you know, just churning article after article that is defamatory and quite frankly not true, the best thing as cisgender people you can do to help us is speak out, consume different kind of medias. That is not just the typical cisgender heterosexual media. Look at queer medias like Pink News, Them, Queer AF, Vice, all of those that can give you a different stories that is on the headlines right now, and what is really going on with trans rights used as a political football by the government to win the next election. So I think this is where we really need your help.